go to the state and say, all right, how do we get regulation so it's appropriate? You need a certain kind of regulation, but it allows businesses to grow. So the first thing we do is, in the process of making state government smaller and more effective, like we did in the city, we would also cut red tape. Second thing, I think, is rebranding the state as being pro-business. If we're not going to raise taxes, and we desperately need to have more revenues for education, higher education, transportation, healthcare, whatever, every part of the state budget is upside down, we've got to create more revenue through more jobs and more generation of income tax. So we have to be pro-business, but at the same time pro-environment. We have to be pro-development, but also pro-neighborhood. And Colorado's a unique place we can do this. Progressive 15, I've driven out through two separate trips through the Eastern Plains, and that sense of opportunity out there is palpable. And we just have to figure out in a real way, how do we rebrand ourselves so that we get jobs and businesses able to go all over the state. We spent a bunch of time in the last 2 months lobbying and working hard to get this $100 million grant that the Commerce Department announced on Monday that's going to deliver high-speed, redundant, broadband internet access to every school district in the state of Colorado. There are 48 school districts in Progressive 15, almost a quarter of the total school districts in the state. When you have high-speed internet access that allows businesses to grow, so that's the second one there, is to really rebrand the state as pro-business. And then the last one, I think ultimately we have to find direct ways of access to capital, and how can the state create and leverage access to capital so small businesses, when they're growing, can afford to hire more people.
Mr. Maes.
Thank you. As I travel around the state and I talk to small business people, I ask them, what can the governor do to help you be more successful? And I get the same three-word answer: leave me alone. Just get out of my way and let me be successful at my business. Well, what does that really extrapolate into? Getting rid of the red tape, I call it reducing regulations. When a gentleman who wants to take his private income and he wants to build a restaurant, and he goes to build that restaurant, and CDOT says, you have to put a deceleration lane in front of your restaurant in Cortez, Colorado for $150,000. The restaurant owner wants to create construction jobs, he wants to create permanent jobs in a small community, and regulatory agencies say, no, you've got to do this to create those jobs. You know what he did? He said, I don't have to create these jobs. I've got a successful business already. I don't need to create another one. And he did not. So we have to get regulations off the small business. They ought to be able to pick up the phone, call Don Rostica and say, Don, would you get these guys off my back? I'm trying to create some jobs and some business here. And Don should say, let me see what I can do for you. Number two, we've got to reduce taxes. The small business personal property tax must go once and for all. Now, we want to backfill those revenues. I know some of you are concerned about that, but it needs to go. We need to find a way to backfill it. And the third, I have to agree with the mayor. If any of you remember Governor John Love, how many go back? You want to admit that? Yeah, some of you do. John Love, by the way, never held office before he became governor. Did you know that? John Love never held office before he became governor. He was a small-town lawyer. And what he did is he created a program called Sell Colorado. Well, we might not use that term, but we've got to come up with that open for business sign for Colorado. And being a business-to-business expert, I think I'm the best at helping create that wealth for small business and creating.
There's no two ways about it that the job of the governor in this job creation environment or task is one of job owning to a large extent. Because the governor does not have the ability in Colorado to change policies in a way, especially those that are designed specifically for legislative, doesn't have the ability to do it. He has to use his own ability to convince people to be a leader and convince people that indeed there is a difference today than there was yesterday. I mean, that it is going to be difficult, I would think, even for the mayor to convince people that that's the case when you look at like the Public Airlines that has and the owner of Frontier that said we're leaving Denver, and we're leaving Denver because of the tax and regulatory burden, and so we've got to change that. That's for sure. And I'm glad to hear the mayor say he's maybe having a change of heart about the regulatory burdens that are imposed on businesses. So all of the job owning tasks that we talk about, I think, have been talked about, and certainly I agree with them. I agree business, the business of the state of Colorado. You have to make them understand that they are welcome here, that they can do business here, that we will treat them fairly. There is one other thing. It is impossible to talk about, you guys. It's impossible to talk about job creation or the economy without talking about the problem we have with illegal immigration. I know everybody feels like, oh, gee, there he goes again. But the reality is this. You've got 250,000 people who are here. That's the Pew Hispanic Trust. I guarantee you the only thing that's conservative about the Pew Hispanic Trust is their estimate of how many illegal aliens are in the state. And they cost us, right now, the taxpayers of the state, a little over $1,400,000,000 a year to support the infrastructure, schools, medical facilities, prison systems. That has got to change. We cannot be a sanctuary city, and we certainly can't be a sanctuary city.
Thank you, Mr. Tancredo. And each candidate has 30 seconds to respond to any of the comments made by the other.
So, and Congressman, you wouldn't be aware of this, but I will make sure we get to the letter. But we have a letter from the CEO of Republic Airlines. He feels he was misquoted in that Denver post article you're referring to. We addressed every use tax and every tax that was in any way, directly or indirectly, affecting Frontier's decision on where to locate. Republic had a free hangar in Milwaukee that saved them somewhere around $3 million a year. And we have a full letter. He said he was misquoted. Those attack ads, whereas they often are, lies and extortions.
Well, in the second, I will read his exact words to you, as soon as I can find them. But we'll ask how he could be misquoted in the sentence he actually uses. We moved out of Denver because of the tax and regulatory burden. Now, when he got hell from some of his board members saying it, he backed away. But those are his first quotes, and they are the ones that matter.
Mr. Maes, do you have any comments? 30 seconds as well.
Well, I think it's important that if you want to get someone who understands jobs, someone